Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer member Vite Ramen. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey there, rulers. Welcome back to Ruler School, bringing you another feature match for the week. Before we get into it, just a reminder that Odyssey Games still has pre-orders for the 7th available pre-release kits and boxes. You can check them out in the links down below. We're coming right up on set release, so make sure you get those pre-orders in if you haven't already. So today, we're trying something a little bit different. We've seen Violet's bursty nature, this traditional kind of red Violet. We haven't really had a chance to put her in a feature match, but we wanted to try something specific here. This idea we've talked about on the channel about, is there a way for Wolfgang to be built in such a way that it could handle Violet? And that's what we're kind of trying to see if there is here today. This is kind of our first draft, and also is going to have some discussion about, when we get to the deck profile of now that we've done this, is there things we think we could do different? But we're going to see how Wolfgang, when designed to focus on saying, you know what, Feethmooge isn't going to be in the meta, we're not going to have to play against Feethmooge. Let's see what we can do as Wolfgang against Violet. And so I'm going to be piloting the Wolfgang deck, and Paul is going to be piloting Violet. So let's go ahead and see here. Obviously, the things to kind of note for the Wolfgang is like, how can we comfortably answer the Atomic Bahamut? How can we kind of make a Violet flip less viable? Things of that nature. And, can we outspeed her potentially with a Terminus? So Wolfgang is going to be going here on the play. And so let's go ahead and jump right in. I do think that Wolfgang, especially with some of the stuff that we've seen so far, previewed from the 7th, is going to potentially have more tools to be able to deal with Violet. So that's something we kind of want to even maybe come back to after we get a few feature matches under our belt with the 7th. But we'll kind of be coming back to this match and seeing what we think in the post, which I think will be a lot of fun. Shuffling up here, getting our first cuts in. Obviously, Wolfgang here wanting to have kind of damage prevention or disruption, while at the same time potentially being able to generate those demonic worlds, right? We want to get those pretty quickly. Things like Residence will help us so we can be will efficient. Things like a heart-to-heart if we were playing it. First turn, though, we hit a Ragnarok's Fiery Stone. This is one of the ways that we're trying to kind of get ahead of Violet. This idea of if we have the opportunity to call stones without having to worry about tapping, so we can judgment quickly into a Terminus. Unfortunately, kind of backfires here because we just hit it on turn 1. Thankfully, though, Paul has a pretty, not like the most aggressive start here. We do see the Maryvilla Heart-to-Heart, which gets to untap the stone. And then we're going to go ahead and play a Tiny Violet down to get that Eternal Wind back. So not getting quite as much value from the Tiny Violet as he could, but still kind of setting him up for kind of some aggression here. So we do get to call that second stone. This makes us feel pretty comfortable here now that we have a 5-color stone, and now we just kind of need to survive for the next couple turns. So getting in that 1-drop Demonic World here, getting that Permafrost. So this will be nice to be able to at least tap down the Violet to slow it a little bit. So thankfully we got a little bit of a target to be able to use this Permafrost on here. He does go ahead and use the Eternal Wind, at least to cycle a little bit before it gets tapped down, which is totally fair. Taking a little bit of a chance here as the Wolfgang player to go ahead and tap out, particularly to cast a Scorn of Dark Alice. This is the idea of maybe we can rip that Atomic Bahamut out of his hand. Unfortunately, though, he has a second one, but he's pretty clocked out in terms of different unique atoms. So that buys us a little bit more time here. Seeing he only has 2 possible unique atoms right now in his combinations makes us feel pretty good. Before recovery, we're gonna go ahead and just use, oh no, I guess post recovery, we're going to go ahead and use Eternal Violet cycling here for Eternal Winds. Oh no, did it at the end of my turn with Violet to cycle a little bit more. Going into his turn here and then move to recover. Doesn't get to get the Tiny Violet recovered because of Permafrost. Floats red. Plays another Heart-to-Heart talk. just to try to dig a little bit here. Just really not seeing much in terms of what the cards he wants. Does hit another 6/8 stone, so there is a world where we judgment here. He does have the Brave Force, but there's not really much. The follow-up hand is not super great for being able to do that. If he had saved the Eternal Wind, there might have been a world where you potentially get to do some kind of crazy stuff for Violet Lethal there, with like discarding the Eternal Winds to recover, to play Burning Robot, to kind of go aggressive that way. Ultimately, though, just choosing to play another Tiny Violet and passing. Down comes that Residence of the Black Demonic World, which is nice for us to be able to start getting really advantage heavy here. We know that he has 1 coin up. We know a little bit of his hand. We're going to cast a Plains of the Raging Winds to recover 2 of our stones after banishing the Demonic World to get a blue Darkness Source. That gets it to come back immediately. So then we can then use it again to get another Darkness Will to cast Wolfgang again. So this is a really nice little trick. You can use the Demonic World multiple times because she just banishes. She doesn't have to tap and banish. So you can kind of cycle pretty quickly to ramp up for Wolfgang's effect with her pretty quickly. Kind of explaining that I have these 2 for Demonic World effects. Now I am locked out of grabbing another Plains of Raging Winds from the Wolfgang because I already control one, but I can get a 2-drop, which is nice. So we're going to go ahead and grab, I believe, Forest. We're taking a little bit of a gamble in the fact that we know part of what his hand is, thinking that we might have an opportunity here to be able to close the game out based on what we see the Forest of the Darkness here, which applies a -3 to his board state because I have 3 uniques. Second play into the Raging Winds here, which feels great. I do control 3 unique names here. He's going to try to use Violet, potentially try to disrupt, ultimately just recovering a stone. He starts to scoop them up, and I'm like, wait a minute, you don't have to. Those are still on board. But this does recover my 3 stones, which is nice. And the reason why we wanted to do that, and we have 3 unique names here, is we want to cast that Scorn. Particularly gets the other Atomic Bahamut out of the way and gives us knowledge of his hand. So knowing that he's got no spot removal in hand, he's already used the Tiny Violet, he's got potential access to a Violet here, but ultimately the one out that he would have, he has 2 outs, which would be Dark Prominence and Gradius, and he doesn't have any in his hand, so that makes us feel pretty comfortable to be able to try to clinch out the game. Stealing the Atomic Bahamut, though, just in general feels really good here, because even if we weren't going to try to push, we'd be in a really good spot. We could also potentially just make him discard his whole hand if we went to do Judgment, which would potentially be the better play here. We're taking a little bit of a risk. You see kind of deliberating here. As soon as Wolfgang hits the board, we're going to get that -4 essentially, which immediately kills the Tiny Violets. And we do go ahead and go for Paradise, which gets us 5 uniques. So we get to go grab, you see I start to grab Paradise, but then again the thought is if I grab the discard one, I get to make him discard 5 cards, and he's got 6 in hand, so that leaves him with 1 card. But the explosiveness of Violet is just that she can just recover all those cards really quickly, especially considering there's a heart-to-heart a Maribel in hand. So we say, you know what, we know your hand. We're going to push for it and say, like, you have to potentially go into it with Violet. We're going to go for the Terminus. He says, yep, that's fine. And we move into game 2. Not even going to take the chance that maybe that top deck is a Gradius or a Dark Prominence. Going into game 2 here, so we feel pretty good. Again, that discard package in the early game, we were able to capitalize on kind of a slow start and low Atom variance from Paul to find that Terminus lethal. Ultimately hitting that turn 1 Ragnarok Stone again, hopefully not getting punished by it this time too much. Paul seeing that Heaven's Hearth School right off the top. Does not have any kind of enabler there. Does go ahead and use Violet for 1 to use Ethereal Wind. Does have, though, a Tiny Violet to get that Ethereal Wind back in his hand. So it feels pretty comfortable. And if you look at that hand is absolutely stacked with Atoms and an Atomic Bahamut. So Wolfgang floats for no reason. And we try to go into a play to be able to set things up. We have that first turn Residence of the Demonic World, which is great. We can start to go ahead and do Banish for black. He goes in response to the Temple of the Dead's the trigger. Once Temple of the Dead's on field, he's going to try to use Violet to do Void. In response to that, what we're doing here is, because we want to be able to save that Residence, we want to get a 2-drop here off of the Residence if at all possible. Unfortunately, though, because of that well-timed Void, we're going to go ahead and pay 1 to go ahead and get that Permafrost, which will then let us get the Residence back before he removes our graveyard. And then we can tap down the Tiny Violet. This is a little bit suboptimal, but it does get us into potentially 3 next turn and helps put bodies on board. Ultimately, though, that doesn't really do much for us because things like Turbulence will just rip us to shreds, and you do see he hits that Aegis. So really tapped out here, just giving Violet a potential opportunity, and this does showcase just the terror that can be sometimes Violet if you tap out. Draws for turn here has plenty of opportunity, and 2 will available, which is all he needs to be able to do Turbulence into Atomic Bahamut, and you see he did just top deck into the the Turbulence to be able to get those atoms to the graveyard. So casts the Turbulence, discarding 1, 2, 3, gets them to grave. Will have the uniques, that'll take me down to 30, and then he does have the 1 will left over to be able to cast the Bahamut for free and go for lethal. So again, just exhilarating the fact that if you're not careful and you do tap out, Bahamut can just come down and finish games very, very quickly. So Violet doing what Violet does, takes us to a game 3. Taking the coin this time as the Wolfgang player, it's pretty good, especially if we do hit that Ragnarok Stone on turn 1. We don't want that to happen again. If we had that safety before, we would have been in a much better position to be able to deal with that board state without having to get too risky, because we could have still gone for the Winds of the Raging and left up Will and had all kinds of stuff. Paul hitting that first turn Atom Stone, discarding Everfrost, no recycle, so I do have a free turn here as the Wolfgang deck. Completely tapped out, can't use the Violet effect. We hit a 6 Sage Stone. Popping coin to use Residence here, banish for black. Casting an Oil Pond, which gets me this one back, and then I can sack it to get a 2 cost. This gets us Forest. So the reason why we want to do Oil Pond into Forest here, if we can be proactive, is the fact that if Paul does play a Tiny Violet, we're in a position to be able to immediately kill it, because it'll have a -2 on it, and then we can tap Oil Pond to do another 2. So we hit Forest of the Dead, Forest of Darkness here, so we have a permanent -2 to the board. It's just very, very good card. Anything that we can do to disrupt Violet's kind of progression is what we want to be doing here, especially since he just doesn't have that much of a start. He didn't have a heart-to-heart talk, he didn't have the Eternal Winds to be able to kind of continue his progression. There's the Ethereal Winds, though, gets to recover that Windstone. And the other thing that's nice is I do have Residence back here, again, because they continue to cycle. There's argument to whether or not Heart-to-Heart Talk or Residence is better. I personally think that Residence is a little bit better, because you just can get so will efficient off of it that you can leave your stones up for other things, especially when you're trying to go for like the anti-Violet route. If you're playing a slower meta, then Heart-to-Heart Talk probably gets you the better value overall, or playing both is even the best. But there is certainly some credence to... in this specific idea where we were trying to get Demonic Worlds as fast as possible, the higher cost Demonic Worlds as fast as possible using Residence. Swinging in for that 1, because there's no reason to not, since she can attack this turn and potentially wait out a Paul play, although it's very doubtful that Paul would feel any kind of discomfort taking 1 damage. Floating the Will so that 6 Stage Stone doesn't burn us. Banishing for black. Playing the Valley, or the Plane of Raging Winds to get this back and then recover our 2 stones. Thankfully, no Void, no decision to pull the trigger on Void. You see, he does have the Void there. There is a world here where judgmenting would potentially get us the lethal, and that's kind of what we're considering here a little bit. It'll get us a stone, it'll get us more demonic worlds, it'll threaten the terminus. There's also a world where we just try to set up to kind of protect ourselves better for next turn and get a little bit more advantage, which is why we're going to banish the residence here. So we've got still two floating black. Paul's sitting on a very big grip of 7 cards, right, or 6 cards right now. There is a world, though, where the playline potential here might actually be to get a 2-drop and then Judgment to get the discard to put Paul at, first off, a -6 to his board state, which makes Violet significantly less threatening, and then also get rid of his whole hand, like completely dump his hand, which makes him feel very, very uncomfortable. Just for a little bit of added security here, we go ahead and try to hit the first layer. I'm going to go search for that real quick. First layer here with 4 uniques means that we get to hit him for a grand total of 16 damage to his face, and then also gains us 16 life back, which also puts us out of range of a initial issue with Bahamut. Violet into Bahamut would not be lethal, and we're also sitting at a very nice -4 to his board state. Does decide to go ahead and use the Violet effect here, which makes us feel like, wait a minute, he's used Violet. Maybe we can go ahead and push advantage here to try to do the terminus play. The problem is we don't have hand knowledge, and that's where this kind of comes to bite us a little bit. The better play here most likely would have been to go ahead and, since we're surviving the Bahamut, if he kills our Wolfgang, if he kills the Wolfgang in response to this, before all this happens, we're in a spot to be able to then go get a terminus if we need to. Probably would have been just to go ahead and discard hand, but we always say, hey, you know what, you've used the Violet effect, now makes us feel like maybe you don't have anything to be able to stop. You're out at this point would literally be exact like radius. So we're gonna go ahead and try to give swiftness to the Fallen Angel of Terminus here. And after he gains swiftness, but before he can give any other effects, we're going to get hit with a Gradius. So this means that he'll lose all of his abilities and take 800. So he survives. He's a 2/2 at this point, or he's a 10/10 with 8 damage on him, so he'll survive, which also makes us feel a little comfortable because we can still set up a -16 for his side of the board, which survives as a Bahamut. The problem is, again, we've already used Wolfgang now and put the Paradise on field, so even though the fact that we have another Paradise in deck, if Wolfgang flips, we don't get enough. If Wolfgang reactivates, we can't get another Sanctuary. So it would have actually probably been better to go for the Swamp, to discard his hand, to make it a grind when he's already low on life, and beat him a little bit with Wolfgang, to then be able to use the cards in my hand to eventually get to the Fallen Angel again. So he's just going to go ahead and crack a stone and then use what's in his grave to get to the Bahamut. In response to the casting of the Bahamut, we're going to apply a -16 to the board. So Bahamut will get to burn the board for 10. He does have 5 uniques because of the stone. And then the Bahamut will get a -16, which takes him down to 24, and then a permanent -5. So he's down to 19. Still gets to do 4,000 damage to the board, which is a lot, but now he's only swinging in for 19, which makes us feel a little bit more comfortable. Problem is now we still need to find another way to find lethal, and this is where that situation came in from before, where if I just discarded his hands, I'd probably be in a lot better shape here, especially since even if this Bahamut came down, like he did happen to top deck the Bahamut, I'd lose the Wolfgang. I still wouldn't die because of the stat negs related to the life gain plus the stat negs from all my demonic worlds, and then I could push back with going into the lethal that way. So ultimately, this game, a little bit of a misplay here, but that's good to be able to talk about the line that could have found us the lethal if we had done it a little bit differently. Paying 1 here to go ahead and use Wolfgang's, or to just cast a permafrost from hand. This to be able to tap down the Bahamut. Floating some will, calling a second stone. This does let me get a 2-drop potentially out of the Wolfgang here. I think at this point I was recognizing that it would have been smarter to go ahead and discard his hand. Getting a 1-drop from the deck to try to leave open 1 will for some kind of interaction during Paul's turn. Getting the Temple of the Dead, that gets us 7 tokens. Does kind of put Paul on a little bit of a clock, because we're saying, you know, hey, this is 2,800 damage represented, you get 1 turn. The problem is turbulence. If there is an atomic turbulence, it just wipes them all out for just 2. Even worse if he does get another atom or another Bahamut. At that point in time, we just leave up the will. Pass the turn. We got a Everfrost to draw another card here during the end phase. Go to Paul's turn. Does hit that 6 Sage Stone. So can Judgment this turn if he wants. Verifying that it's just the 5 atoms in his grave. Does no plays the heart to heart, draws a card here. Then uses Violet's effect because he can. Discarding another Everfrost, continuing to draw. Like you see that it kind of feels counterintuitive to make him discard his hand because he just gets so much hand advantage. But based on the situation, the thought process should have been to get to his hand. So he does play the improved healing robot here. So if I had Necronomicon barrier, this probably would have been the game, because I could have stopped the improved healing robot from having an enter. He doesn't have the way to get the atoms to the grave. Unfortunately, though, I don't. So he's able to recast, get those 5 to the grave, heal up, and then recast the Atomic Bahamut. Now, it does have a -7 to its board, so it's only going to be able to hit me for a grand total of 30. Or sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It is going to only be able to hit me for a grand total of 30 damage, or 33 damage. Takes me down to exactly 4. So it's like, hey, there's a world here where maybe I get there, and then before recovery during my turn, What Paul actually has is, to finish off the game, he's going to use Violet's effect and has magical loveliness to burn me for that last 4. So that is it. Anti-Violet Wolfgang giving it its best shot, making some misplays. Definitely have to play a little bit differently than I think. We could have played that better to the point of getting to a win against Paul. So this is a good, again, we want to come back and visit this matchup a little bit more after this next set comes out, because I think that there is more playability here than we first thought. And again, kind of researching here, the fact that there were some lines of there was the line of I had the I had the swamp in hand, so I couldn't get it off of the Wolfgang flip. So there's certainly some exploring here for this matchup, especially post set release, to see if the new tools that Wolfgang will get, especially the life gain demonic world, will be able to give Wolfgang a potential way to get through this matchup. But it was a great set of games. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Deck profiles for both of these lists will be up later this week. The anti-violent Wolfgang list will be tweaked based on kind of this adventure to see what we think the deck list should have actually been, or what tweaks we would make to maybe shore up the matchup a little bit further. But let us know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. And until next time, as always, this is DeMeulle73 saying, class dismissed.